tell you something the enemy doesn't want you to believe? It's not too late for you. It's not too late to start, not too late to change, not too late to walk in the purpose that God has planned for your life. I don't care if you're 30, 50, 70, 90. God doesn't run on our timelines. He runs on his calling, and he's not done with you yet. You know, we live in a world that celebrates early bloomers, right? The 20-year-old millionaires, the 19-year-old influencers, the ones who made it by 25. People who are still single at 30 are looked at like there's something wrong with them, right? You know, doctors literally call pregnancies after the age of 35 geriatric. Yeah, for real. But in the kingdom of God, it's not about when you start, it's about why and who sent you. Moses didn't lead the Israelites out of Egypt until he was 80. He had a rough past, a speech problem, and a long season of obscurity in the wilderness. But when God called, Moses stepped into his purpose and changed history. Abraham didn't become the father of many nations until he was 100. Sarah was 90, and he and Sarah waited decades for the promised child. And when all odds were against them, God still fulfilled his word. And let's not forget about Jesus. He didn't even begin his public ministry until the age of 30. And in today's world, that would seem late, right? But in God's timing, it was right on schedule. Caleb in the Bible was 85 years old when he finally entered the promised land. He waited 45 years to walk in the fullness of the promise, but his faith never aged and his strength didn't fade. Zechariah and Elizabeth were well advanced in years, according to Luke 1:7, and had no children until God chose them to parent John the Baptist, the prophetic forerunner of Christ, right? Even though they thought it was too late, their obedience made the way for something eternal. And Anna, the prophetess, she spent decades worshiping and praying in the temple, largely unnoticed by the world, probably because she's a woman, right? But in her later years, she was the very first to recognize Jesus as the Messiah and proclaim him to others. Now, I could keep going on because there are so many: Noah, Paul, Simeon, and more. But what I really want to know is why we disqualify ourselves at a certain age when God hasn't. You know, the world may celebrate speed, but God honors patience and surrender. The world loves youth, but God uses faithfulness. Now, okay, I know you might be thinking, oh, okay, but those are just Bible people, right? People in the Bible, that was a long time ago. Well, first of all, Hebrews 13:8 says that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if he can do it back then, he can do it now, right? But just to appease you, I do have some more recent stories. Stan Lee created the first Marvel superhero, the Fantastic Four, at age 39, launching his career in his 40s. Vera Wang entered the fashion industry at 40 after a career in figure skating and journalism. Joyce Meyer didn't start her public ministry until her 40s. And today, you know, millions of people around the world know Jesus because she said yes, even though it may have felt late to the world standards, right? Samuel L. Jackson got his breakout film in Pulp Fiction at age 43 after decades of smaller roles. Rodney Dangerfield found comedy at age 46, right? Julia Child published her first cookbook at age 49, launching her career in her 50s, right? Ray Kroc, thank you McDonald's. He brought McDonald's into life at age 52, and now it is a global empire, right? Colonel Sanders founded KFC at 62 after many years of setbacks and odd jobs, right? Laura Ingalls Wilder published the first Little House on the Prairie book at age 65. Yeah, that's when she began her writing career. Peter Rodgett, didn't know about this one. It's a new one to me. Published the first Rodgett's Thesaurus. Never heard of that, but it was 73. And now it is a, thesaurus that touches generations, right? Grandma Moses, love her, began painting at 78. And Now she's, a well-known artist, right? Each of them could have said it's too late for me, but they didn't, and neither should you. God's timing is not delayed, it is perfect. You may feel like you're running behind. I know I did. Every birthday I'm like, should be further along, right? Like you've missed your chance. But God's not looking at your age, your resume, or your timeline. He's looking at your readiness and your dependence on him and your heart. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, he has made everything beautiful in its time. Not your time, his time. And his timing is never random. It's strategic, right? In the Bible, God often took his time, not because he was stalling, but because he was preparing. He was working behind the scenes, developing something in his people that couldn't be rushed. Things like character that could carry the calling they had, wisdom that could come through experience, right? Endurance that was forged in the patience and the trials, and faith that didn't rely on our feelings. Let's look a little closer at Moses. He spent 40 years in Pharaoh's palace, and then 40 years in the wilderness tending sheep. And then at age 80, God called him to lead an entire nation out of bondage. Now, those 80 years weren't wasted time. It was a training ground. And by the time Moses heard God's voice from the burning bush, he wasn't the impulsive prince he was, when he was younger. He was humble. He was dependent on God. And he was ready, even though at times he didn't feel it, right? But God knew he was ready. So if you felt behind or forgotten, too old, too delayed, maybe it's not delay at all. Maybe it's God's divine timing. And maybe the thing that you thought disqualified you is the very thing that God is going to use. Romans 11:29 says, for the gifts and the callings of God are irrevocable. That one verse is strong enough to silence every lie that says you blew it, you missed it, you've had your chance. No, God hasn't changed his mind about you. Your mistakes didn't cancel your calling. Your detours didn't disqualify your destiny, and your delays don't diminish your value. We serve a God who doesn't write people off. Romans 8:28 says that he works all things together for the good of those who love him. So whatever your mistakes or your missteps that you feel you've taken, God can turn every one of them around for your good and use those for the good of those around you. You might have walked away from your purpose. You might have made decisions that you're not necessarily proud of. You may feel like you're too far from where you should be, but God doesn't call the perfect. He doesn't call the, qualified. He qualifies the called, right? He calls the willing. And if you're willing to turn back and to trust him, to try again, he can still use you. Now, let me show you what I mean. There's a man in the Bible who lost everything. He let his weakness take over. He gave in to temptation. He broke his vow to God, and it cost him everything. His strength, his freedom, his vision even, like his literal vision. And that's Samson. And Samson's story is found in Judges 13-16, and it's one of the most dramatic yet redemptive stories in the Bible. You see, Samson was set apart by God before he was even born. An angel prepared his parents and said that he would be a Nazirite, someone dedicated to God from the womb. That meant he had specific vows to follow. No drinking wine, no touching dead things, and most famously, not cutting his hair, right? God gave Samson supernatural strength to lead and protect Israel from the Philistines. And for a while, he walked in that power, right? But over time, Samson started relying more on his own strength than on God. He became reckless with his calling, careless with his boundaries, and got entangled with a woman named Delilah, who eventually betrayed him, right? She lured him into revealing the secret of his strength, his hair, and while he slept, she had it shaved off. In that very moment, his strength had left him. The Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes and threw him into prison. Ouch, right? Now, it looked like his story was over, right? He was once anointed and unstoppable, and now he was blind and bound and broken. But here's the most powerful part. While Samson was in that prison, his hair began to grow back, symbolizing that his purpose was not over, right? And in his final moment here on this earth, in humility and surrender, he cried out to God and said, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me once more." That's Judges 16:28. And you know what? God answered. And Samson pushed against the pillars of the Philistine chapel, and in that act defeated more enemies in his death than he did in his life. That's powerful. Even in Samson's lowest moment, chained, blind, humiliated, God still heard his cry. And in one final act of surrender, God fulfilled his purpose through Samson's life. Not in the palace, but in the prison. Not in his strength, but in his surrender, right? That's what God can do. He takes broken people and still does beautiful things. He doesn't erase your story, but he redeems it. So, no matter what's behind you, your purpose still stands. And God still says to this day, "I choose you." Yeah, he chooses you no matter what you've been through. Now, here is how you can step into that purpose practically today at whatever age you might be. First of all, ask God to maybe reignite that passion inside of you. Have you buried a dream because you thought it was too late? Ask God to revive that inside of you, that passion for it. Start where you are. Your next step might look small, but it can be significant. Just start. And don't compare your calling. You know, obedience matters more than what other people are doing. Everybody has their own thing going on, and so don't pay attention to what other people are doing. Focus on yours. And say yes even if you feel unqualified. God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called, right? Now, I want you to let this video be your sign today. You haven't missed it. You're not too late. You're not too old. You're not disqualified based on past decisions. If you're still breathing, God still has a plan. So stop looking at the clock, stop comparing your journey to others, and start walking in your purpose now. It's not too late, it's right on time. And if this video encouraged you today, please be sure to hit that like button, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you, and subscribe so you never miss a video. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you have a blessed week.